Hi, I'm Gareth, the Technical Support Specialist at Atlantic British, and today we are going to show you how to remove the front bumper cover off a 2005 Land Rover LR3. This is a precursor to installing a winch bumper that we're going to be putting on the vehicle. We thought it would be interesting for you to see actually how to remove the front bumper cover and then the rear support behind it. As you can see, I've already removed the grille and the headlights. The grille is very easy to remove. It's all plastic clips, tang clips. You press on them and pull slightly, and the two underneath, and it pulls right out. The headlights are very easily removed with two latching pulls, one either side, and an electrical connector, and the whole headlamp comes out. So the next step is to start removing all the hardware, which there's quite a bit. There's at least 8 across the top and another 8 underneath. We're going to remove a couple now for demonstration, and I might even end up having to put the car on the lift or maneuver it to a better position so I can access the ones underneath. So there are actually 6 screws that hold the cover on the top. I'm going to move the vehicle forwards and see whether I can get to the other ones from underneath on a creeper or something, and then try and remove the front cover. It's pretty loose right now across the top. There's clips on either side of it that hold it down also. Having to be careful with those upon removal. Well, the lower valance was pretty easy to remove. I see there's probably 4 pieces of hardware that screw into the frame that look like they're heavily corroded. So I'm going to spray them with some penetrating oil and try and loosen them off a little bit before attacking them even harder. There's some screws on the front lower valance here. They look like regular Phillips, but they've probably been replaced in the past, which were probably Torx headed screws in the past, is my guess. Okay, so removal of the screws from underneath in the subframe was a bit of a test. The screws were seized. I ended up having to shear the heads off them that screw into the subframe. They were rotted in there. There was no way they were coming out without damaging them. It's something I can clean up later. Upon further investigation, the trim fender arch liner needs to be removed. There's a little tab down here that has to be accessed from behind the fender well. You can unscrew a couple of screws from the inner fender well and pull it out slightly with a trim tool to lift the tab up, and then gently pull up and out at the same time. There's also a little screw on the inside here that helps release the inner fender. It's a Phillips screw, easily undone. And then what we're going to do is move the fender liner out and remove the screw here, which holds the front bumper clip onto the vehicle as well. Okay, so I found what they don't tell you in the removal instructions from the repair manual is that there are 2 little pins on the inside edge of the actual plastic bumper cover that you kind of have to pry very gently from down here, and that will loosen pretty much the whole cover. So theoretically it should slide out and off. have it. Quick visual of what the reinforcement looks like in the bumper from behind. And we'll pop this off to the side of the vehicle and we'll inspect what's going to have to be removed for reinforcements of the main bumper assembly for the new winch bumper that will be fitted. There was notes to remove the brace that we exposed from after we removed the front bumper cover. I removed the brace, 4 bolts hold it on. It actually slides up and out once you remove it. They tell you to remove the air vent, the air dam section, which is here, mounted up underneath, and also disconnecting the ambient air temperature sensor, and that gets relocated further up here afterwards. The next step for mounting the winch bumper is to mount the brackets. The instructions inside the kit tell you to drill out the old riv nuts here so we can fit the new 3/8 bolts through and screw them into the supplied brackets. So I'm going to start drilling out the riv nuts, and I will loosely mount it, and at that point we'll come back to the installation. We left off where we removed the main support from the front bumper cover. There were captivated nuts in the front of the frame here, and in the instructions that will come with the winch bumper, it tells you to drill out the 8mm hold nuts to at least 10mm. It's also my suggestion, go a little larger after you've drilled out the nuts, because you're going to need a little bit of flexibility in the room for the brackets to move up and down slightly. I would like to have actually augured the hole out a little deeper just to give a bit more room for adjustment, but it's not quite possible because behind these brackets here are molded out areas for the captivated nuts and the new brackets. So at this point I'm going to set up ready. We'll loosely mount the front brackets here and here to the front of the car. The kit will come with a bracket here for the old valve block for the air suspension that it slips into and locks into place, just to stop it from dangling around. So that's the next step. So I'm going to start working on that. I'll loosely mount it and we'll take off again. The brackets are loosely mounted, and I have to tell you right now, it's a little bit of a struggle. They weigh about 15 to 20 pounds each. They're very heavy 10mm plate brackets, so you're going to be fumbling around a little bit. It's especially if you're on your own installing this, you're going to be sort of propping it up with your knee. You're going to be trying to screw the bolts in at the same time as holding these brackets. It's a little bit of a challenge and fun. There is one bolt that holds the bracket on, which is going to be different. It's going to be a bit shorter in length. It's 2 inches as opposed to 2.5 to 3 inches. That's because on EU cars they use diesels mainly, and it takes a different style radiator, and if it had the long bolt it would go in and hit the bracket for the plastic radiator. So this is where we get a shorter bolt, and it will go in this lower right corner of the passenger side. As you can see, where the captive nut is for the bracket here lines up straight with this plastic bracket, so we're going to put a shorter bolt in there so we don't break the plastic bracket on the radiator. And again, it's a little bit of a fumble. to get everything lined up. It will line up, but it just takes a little bit of working around. As you can see, I put the top 2 bolts in, and the bracket's still quite loose. This one goes in there, like that. And you can see how tight it is from the back of the bracket, the supply bracket, to hold it on to the plastic bracket of the radiator. So at this point I'm going to zip it up to tighten it up. I'm not going to over tighten just at this point. I'm just going to sort of snug fit and arrange a little bit of adjustment so we can then loosely mount the top part of the main winch bumper itself. I've got the brackets tightened up. They're not overly tightened. As you can see, there are slots in this bracket to align the bumper left and right. It doesn't need a whole lot of adjustment at all. I'm actually going to use a dead blow hammer and tap it backwards and forwards and mount the winch bumper on to the brackets loosely, so I know how much I need to adjust side to side, pull it off again, and then adjust as needed and tighten up firmly. So I've established we need to go over to the driver's side by about 1/4 of an inch. Good old dead blow hammer, just a gentle tap. Make sure my adjustment's right by rechecking and remounting the winch bumper. There are slots in the actual bumper itself for a little and account for a little bit of movement. Basically what we're checking is that the edge of the bumper somewhat lines up with the fender flare. Now then, at this point we'll leave it on. Oh, of course no access, so it does have to come back off. Get the hammer, we just give it a gentle tap. And as you can see, the job can be done on your own. It's just a little bit challenging weight wise and awkwardness, but and that's about even both sides at this point. So at this point I'm happy with how the brackets are mounted to the frame of the vehicle. I'm going to pull off the metal winch bumper. I'm going to tighten the brackets once and for all at this point in time, and then do any other adjustments we need to take care of. So at this point the brackets are now nice and tight. I will point out at this time you will be getting a new washer fluid tank. The old plastic one we removed when we removed the bumper cover. It comes with 2 holes, one for the front windshield washer motor and one for headlamp washers. That's an EU mandatory thing. Of course we're bringing it here to the United States slowly. Some vehicles over here already have it, some don't. So for cars that don't have it, we have an optional headlamp washer pump assembly which we can supply, or we're going to supply blanking plugs for the other hole. This is the tank that will be used. It mounts in this corner up underneath I'm going to have to look at the directions again, but in this area here, and it's hidden behind the metal bumper. Now, if you're going to install headlamp washers, we can supply the motor, the piping, and the headlamp washer jets that install here and on the other side. The original washer pump connector is here, and the front and rear washer lines here. Now for power for the headlamp washers, the connector, I found it tucked up and mounted to the body of the vehicle here. It will have a blanking plug in it that keeps water and dirt out of it. This was the blanking plug here that I took out, and it was mounted up underneath the body here. This particular vehicle uses a black ground wire, a red and green power wire to the washer motor. Remove it, remove the blanking plug, it's easy. This will plug into the washer motor for the headlamp washer jets. And at that point we're going to start doing the install of the washer tank itself. The winch bumper comes with fog lights regardless. Comes with a short pigtail lead to connect into the front harness of the car. Of course these are aftermarket components and not a direct fit into the harness of the vehicle. I have found this car did not come with originally fitted front fog lights. I have found the connector for fog light power. It's on the passenger side here. This is the connector, and it also had a blanking plug installed into the end of it, which I removed, and it exposes the connections. This connector will be wired into the fog lights that will mount onto this winch bumper. However, I can't use the factory harness. As you see, the connectors are quite different, so we're going to have to cut and splice into the original harness here. The blue wire with a purple trace is the power wire, and 2 separate ground wires, one for left and one for right. You have to tap into the blue and purple wire for power for both sides. Now the fog light is lined. We're just going to line it vertically with the bumper, which has a couple of vertical bars in it. It will literally sit here, and the bracket oriented to meet with the original supplied captivated nuts. The screws are supplied that will hold it in place, and we're going to make our own harness to adapt into the original harness on the car. However, saying that, a lot of North American spec vehicles do not come with factory fitted fog lights in the bumper. Some do, some don't. This car did not come with that option, with front fog lights. So I'm installing the fog light loosely for now so I can adjust the orientation of the lenses afterwards, but these will be held in and pinched in by the brackets supplied with the kit. We'll do another section after the install of the front bumper on how to cut and splice the fog lights into the main harness, which will be involved in the same video as the install of the bumper, possibly as a subsection to it. So for those of you out there who opt to put the fog lights in, and it all helps for lighting of course, whether you're winching or you just want it for aesthetic look or anything. For the people who do not have fog lights installed on the front bumper originally in the cover, whereas this car also did not have it, I had to search around a little bit for this connector. I found it actually taped back on itself on this piece of harness here, and whereas the car wasn't fitted with front fog lights as a factory option originally, we also had to purchase a new headlamp switch. The stock headlamp switch is just a side light, dip beam and a single pull for rear fog lights, which I believe are mandatory in this country as well. Now, EU countries and over here, it's a double pull switch. I have the washer bottle installed nice and firmly there, it's not going to rattle around. Actual filler pipe for the reservoir fits properly and locks into where it should do on the reservoir up top. We can install the pipe work to the washer bottle motors, the electronics, and we're all done at this corner. The next step is I'm going to again test fit the front winch bumper, make sure we clear everything, we don't have any fouling of any of the components. If I'm happy with it, I'm going to bolt it down into place and I'm going to mount the air valve block to the bracket supplied on the main bracket here. And this time the holes are lining up pretty well. And before I tighten them down, I just want to check the adjustment from left to right. Too bad. And I would probably say at this point I'm quite happy with how the bumper mounts left and right. I did do a dry fit of this a couple of days ago, and I did cut the fender flares pre today. I cut them about a good half inch shorter than the bumper. I didn't want them rubbing on the bumper, causing it to rub the powder coating off it. I think it gives it a little more of a rugged look anyway, a gap here and there, both sides, and it'll probably close up the gap a little bit. If I'm not too keen on it, afterwards I may even use some black foam tape to fill in the gap a little bit, make it look a little prettier as it were, but all the same, it's going together pretty well right now. The next step after this, I will be installing the headlights, what's left of the front grille. As you can see, when the front grille goes in, a little bit of this silver paneling will be exposed here and here. So what I may even do is get a black gloss spray can or a matte black finish spray can and just blend it in a little bit so it's not as obvious when it's all together. Everything seems to be lined up pretty nicely. I'm pretty happy with how everything fits. Our angles are good, the gaps aren't too bad. I'm going to start and mount the fog lights in securely. Secured the fog lights. Like I say, in the next segment, as an additional video to this, we're going to show you how to wire them in, whether you're putting a toggle switch in or whether you're going to actually wire in a new headlamp switch, or if you already had the pre-existing headlamp switch, we'll show you how the wiring goes. Along with the headlamp washer jets, all of that can be done once you've mounted the washer jet, all the washer line pipe, the pumps in on the tank, and they will be operational. The last thing I'm going to do is trim off the back of the mud wing and tidy everything up a bit, and get a couple of E-clips to mount and screw the fender liner firmly to the bumper itself. Here we are working on the LR3 front winch bumper. This section, we're going to trim off the excess that we have for the front fender liner. I already pre-marked it with a Sharpie. I am giving myself a little extra above and beyond, believe it or not, the bumper itself, because as you draw it forwards, you're going to lose that distance. I'm going to use, because I have the luxury of an air hacksaw, I'm going to use an air hacksaw to cut all the extra off it, both left and right sides. We're just going to video this side for now. When it comes up further, we might even end up trimming a little more deeper just to eliminate the excess look, as it were. We have a bit of a rusty front cross member down here. I'm going to loosen and get rid of the loose rust from it, and we're just going to hit it with a bit of a black spray can just to blend it in a little bit. Of course, it's not replaceable unless you want to replace the whole front end of the vehicle, and of course we're not going to go into that. Then the next section after that will be, we'll start wiring in the front fog lights to the vehicle electrical system. So at this point I'm going to grab the air line and start taking out the excess. you can see, I've cut off the whole section. Back here on the actual bumper, we have 2 brackets with holes in. I am going to install some what are called speed clips. They're nuts which will take a large screw, self-tapping screw, which will hold that firmly and solidly to the bumper and stop it from vibrating around. And I think we've got a nice trimmed off section there which will be adequate finish for the vehicle. Reuse some of the old hardware that we took out from the fender liner. I've screwed them into speed nuts. It holds that panel in nice and firmly. It's not going to rattle around or vibrate, and I think and feel that's enough to hold it together. So here we are, winch bumper mounted, headlights in, the washer bottles mounted. I actually firm mounted the front fog lights, driving lights, auxiliary lights, whatever you want to call them. They're in there. We have pigtails on them. This vehicle started off having no fog lights, no assistance for fog lights at all. However, I did find in the harness that it did have a fog light harness connector with a blanking plug installed into it. I also realized that the original headlight switch only had application for rear fog lights. Rear fog lights, single pull. We actually purchased a new headlight switch, which is what is called a double pull for fog lights front, and then a second pull for the fog lights for rear. So in the meantime, we've actually installed that. I don't know whether we can get a quick view of it here. It's right here, illuminated. We can see a single pull for the front fog lights, and we get illumination on the dashboard for front fog lights, a double pull for rear fog lights, and this also has application for auto lights. However, this vehicle doesn't have the range sensor for automatic headlights to illuminate and come on. That would be an addition. Right now we're happy to do without auto lights. We've gained front fog lights through the headlight switch. Now this is an easy install as well. The knee bolster literally pulls down out of the way. A good gentle firm tug pulls the section out. There's one big electrical connector here, a squeeze and a pull pulls it out. 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold the headlight switch into the trim. We swapped it out, literally plugged it back in, and we'll have headlight and fog light operations. The fog lights are installed firmly. These are the pigtails. The opposite side terminals and connectors come with them as a kit. We do not supply the wiring. This kit I made up myself. I just got some 14 gauge wire, red power, black ground, and tapped in and spliced into the main harness where the fog light connector was for fog lights. If this vehicle was fitted with it, I found it in the harness, cut the connector off and spliced in. Basically made the harness up really quickly. I'm gonna put the bare wire, the insulated wires into a plastic conduit and run them back behind the grille, zip tie them to the stay here across the back and down, and then tuck them down through here behind the headlight, and any loose wires I'm going to loop up electrical tape and leave it laying behind. If the harness needs to get serviced at all, we can always undo it and lengthen it if we need to. A quick test now to make sure that everything's working. We plugged it in. I know it's firmly attached to the splice. We'll test it out. And hopefully they're on. There we go. Quick test. And the next step for me is to wrap these in the plastic conduit, reroute them behind, zip tie them like I said, and route it through, put the headlamp in, and we're done with the electrics for the front of the car.